Our next session focuses on technology, energy, and their growing impact on national security. As the global race for technological and energy dominance accelerates, national security is increasingly linked to advancements in artificial intelligence, energy systems, and access to critical minerals. This panel will examine how emerging technologies are reshaping defense capabilities and energy resilience, as well as the implications of China's expanding influence in these sectors. Please welcome our distinguished panelists, Dr. Ceciliman Panchanathan, University Professor of Technology and Innovation and Foundation Chair in Computing and Augmented Intelligence at Arizona State University, and former Director of the U.S. National Science Foundation. Mr. Akihisa Shiozaki, Member of the House of Representatives, Japan. Moderating the discussion is Mr. Hiroyuki Akita, commentator at Nikkei Inc. Please welcome them to the stage.
So could you take a seat so that we could start shortly? Okay, we will start. Welcome to this second session. And I'm so delighted to be here with two distinguished panelists. Dr. Punch, former director of National Science Foundation. Thank you very much for traveling all across the Pacific to join here. And I know that the time difference is terrible, but I hope that the jet lag is treating you kindly, at least. Mr. Shiozaki, I'm so glad that you could make it. We will discuss about the challenge in coming years, or coming years or even decades, but I know that you are facing serious urgent challenge in coming days to win the election. So I'm very grateful that you make it.
Actually, this morning, many people have asked me, Shiozaki-san, how could you be able to make it here when the election is upcoming? You must be so confident with your election result. And I told him, no, I'm not confident, but Jimbo-san has assured me a fellowship position at the I-House if things go bad. So I'm very, very happy to be here today. Thank you.
I was almost going to ask Jimbo-san to replace, but I know that your constituency is so enthusiastic to send you here. So I'm very grateful. And Mr. Shiozaki is a leading architect of AI strategy in LDP. And also, as you can see, he speaks, I know that he speaks very fluent Japanese, but his English is even more or as fluent as his English is.
I'm working on my Japanese too.
Yeah. So anyway, let's start. So in this session, we will explore the answer for a very, very crucial topic. That is how the technology and science and technology and innovation will shape the national security and state competitiveness, especially in the context of great power competition with China. And specifically, I'd like to focus mainly 3 pillars because of the time constraint. One pillar is innovation and AI. And second is critical minerals and rare earth supply chain risk. And thirdly, we will focus on energy security and its impact on geopolitics. So let's begin from the AI and innovation. So Dr. Punch, first of all, thank you for kindly allowing me to call you Dr. Punch instead of Panchanathan. It is much easier. Thank you very much. So my question to you is that, based on your experience as a former director of National Science Foundation, how do you see the science and technology shaping national security and also competitiveness of state in the context of competition with China or other great powers? And more specifically, how do you assess the current status of AI competition US, between US and China, and what do you concern most? I'm sorry to ask you a very journalistic question, but what do you concern most in that context? Yeah.
Thank you, Akita-san. First of all, thanks to Sedona Forum, Tokyo. I have attended the Sedona Forums back in Sedona. It's such a very, very rich thing. And I was on the other side, and so to be this side is kind of strange. And Shiozaki-san, great to be with you. Thank you. So just to dive into the question right away, competitiveness, national security with science, technology, innovation is not something that we need to even talk about based on what is today and what the future is, but based on what has happened in the past and where we are today. So if you look at NSF as an investor alone, but then in the US we have many, many investors, the AI of today, I often remind people, is 5 to 6 decades of sustained investment by NSF. Even during the so-called AI winters, we never refrained from investing because we knew that this has tremendous potential and possibility. That is true of also quantum, 3 to 4 to 5 decades of sustained investment. So if you take any of the technologies that we celebrate today that has a name, those technologies are hypersonics, whatever you want to call them, those technologies were because of the sustained investments of the past. And so that's why we are competitive. That's why we're able to deploy it for national security objectives. And so the answer is very simple, I would say, that continued investment in discovery, translation, and innovation is an extremely important priority in order for us to stay competitive. So that's the first part of the answer. The second part of your question was, what is it relative to AI and how are we doing relative to China? I would say that still United States is in a very strong leadership position. Clearly, there is tremendous competition from China. Now, people would already ask often, well, are they 6 months behind you? Or 6 months ahead of you? Are they caught up with you? It's very hard to quantify that in those terms, but all I can tell you is that the competition is very stiff, and it is immediate and intense. And therefore, for us, it then predicates the most important thing that we need to think about is how do we not only hyper invest, but also bring multiple sectors into the discussion of advancing the AI objectives. Now, I will talk about this later, possibly, the Genesis initiative that was launched recently, which is truly a partnership between academia, industry, and national labs. This kind of thinking is what is going to make us outcompete by out-innovating at speed and at scale. So that would be the second thing. You asked me, what are the most concerning things? Mm-hmm. To me, there are many concerning things, right? But let me pick just a few in the interest of time. The first is, we are today where we are with innovation and all the unbelievable discoveries and translations and industries of today because of the underlying talent that we have invested in. And we have welcomed talent from all across the globe at the same time as unleashing talent within the nation. When I came to NSF, I made this point very clear, and we stayed with it through my 5 years, and I'm sure we will into the future. I said we need both unleashing of domestic talent in every corner of our country. I don't think any nation has done this to the point of where all of talent that is available in that nation has been given the opportunities to express itself in its fullest form. We need to do that. And then augment that with talent from all across the globe. Welcome it, retain it, and the combination of both domestic talent at full force and full scale and global talent attracted, retained at full force and full scale is the only way that we will advance. So the concern is with the recent, so the climate of welcoming and retaining being, not as well appreciated or at least being perceived that way is a huge risk. Is a huge risk because that will not sustain our ability to be innovative. And there are other concerns. We will not come to that. My 3 minutes is done.
Yeah. Sorry, before I forgot to mention that we will have 3 rounds of discussion among us, maybe about for 30 minutes, and then open the floor for Q&A. So please think about the question. So if I may follow up, let me ask one question. Actually, when I was assigned to moderate this session, I was very glad because I assumed that I don't have to mention about Mr. Trump at all, but we just need to focus on the policy. But I have to ask, Trump administration has been cutting budget for basic research, and also they plan to cut the budget for the National Science Foundation significantly, as well as NIH. So how do you see the impact of this negative impact being done by Trump administration's policy?
So I get asked this question wherever I go, as you can imagine. But you know what is less understood is that an administration budget is not the final story. It is part of a process. In any administration, it doesn't matter. The current administration, the previous administrations, the president proposes a budget. But that budget then gets discussed by Congress on both sides of the House and the Senate. And if you look at the historical trajectory of science funding budgets, there have been years where presidents have proposed lower numbers, Congress has raised it. There have been years where the president has proposed a high number, the Congress has brought it down. But what we need to pay attention to is what is the enacted budget by Congress. On this front, just 2-3 days ago, if you're watching the news, as you can see, I watch it every day, on this front, the science funding, Congress has essentially said that we need to make sure that the budget for science, technology, and innovation is maintained and in some cases even increased. And if it's a decrease, it's a very marginal decrease at all. So therefore, that's what I pay attention to, is what ultimately gets enacted. And there is a general consensus that this is not the time to cut, but this is the time to invest more. But let's not forget, out of the 3.5% of the GDP of the United States invested in R&D, only 0.7 to 0.8% of that is actually invested in by the federal government. The rest of it comes from the private sector. I often ask the question, how well are we leveraging that also in advancing the science aspirations? So this is something that we need to do, I would argue, in addition to making the case and increasing the investments in science. I hope that that's helpful.
Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm relieved a little bit. Yeah. So anyway, let's move on. Mr. Shiozaki, Japan is located in a very vulnerable geopolitical location, surrounded by China, Russia, North Korea. And in this context, from your perspective, how should we understand the implication, deep implication of AI or other advanced technology for our national security? And also, as you are a leading figure, leading strategist on AI in LDP, my question is how Japan, unfortunately, Japan is far behind to US and other major countries in building its own AI infrastructure. So how will Japan be able to catch up?
Well, thank you, Akita-san. So by way of introduction, I am currently the Secretary General for the LDP's AI policy, science and technology policy, and intelligence policy. So that's a perfect question to address all my roles at the party. In terms of AI, as Akita-san mentioned, I think we all recognize that this is not just industrial policy, it is national security infrastructure. Last October, Anthropic announced that they had detected their first AI-generated automated cyber attack. And this is hosted by nation players. So fully automated, the report says that the cyber hackers' productivity is now tenfold. So the defense side needs to be able to utilize AI capabilities in order to defend. Also, in last year's upper house election, we have detected heavy interference operations by foreign players into the election results, formulating false news, false images, and trying to maneuver the election results. So it is a battle to defend democracy itself. Now, what are we doing in Japan? So in terms of AI research and development, we have the upcoming 7th Science, Technology, and Innovation Plan starting this April. And my committee put together a recommendation last summer to double the amount of science innovation funding. So this will go into effect immediately, and one of the key focus areas of investment will be AI. But science itself by the academics is not going to be enough. We need partnerships and cooperation funding from the private sector. So we have also introduced a tax reform that has raised the tax cuts for corporations to engage in co-research with universities and research institutions so that they will be more incentivized to devote their R&D funding to academia. So we hope these tools will be used widely by the Japanese private community in order to advance the AI research in Japan. Also, you talked about talent, and I think Japan really needs to. This is one area of challenge that I think we really want to work on, because a lot of the Japanese research community is still Japanese-based. We always announce that we always welcome foreign researchers. Please come to Japan, but you find out that you need to do your expense filing in Japanese, or you need to look for your residence status update in Japanese. We need this kind of support. And just last week, Kan Daisuke here invited me to OIST, the Okinawa Institute of Science and Technology. They have a wonderful, wonderful international bilingual program that accepts foreign researchers. So just recently, we have launched the J-RISE initiative, which is a new initiative that really incentivizes universities to make their research platforms fully English-oriented and international. So we'll be welcoming a lot of international talent as
Okay,
well.
thank you very much. Now we all know that he's a very eloquent speaker, so he doesn't have to worry about the election campaign. You can speak for it all day long, at least today. Anyway, to be serious, actually I asked to AI this morning about how much each major powers are spending for AI. And US private sector spend 33 times bigger than Japan, and UK, Germany, France spend 5 times bigger than Japan. So I know that Japan is expanding its budget, but how can you catch up? And in that context, how do you see the most effective collaboration with US and other major powers in order to develop its AI?
So when we design, that's an excellent question, and which I'm very frustrated about. I'm very disappointed, quite frankly, with how little investment is being done in the private sector. And apologies if anyone is from that sector here. But I think it is very important that Japan formulates its priorities very clearly. A lot of people have suggested that, okay, why don't we build a sovereign Japan AI? Government funding, all Japan talent, which is a recipe that we've seen of repeated failures in industrial policy in the past. Instead, I think we should try to formulate an asymmetric strategy, not following what the United States is doing, not trying to compete on the same grounds, but figuring out a unique opportunity where it is still being explored. Areas like AI for science. This is a big potential area that all countries are still trying to find. AI for defense, heavily unexplored in Japan. Lots of these areas, there's so many frontiers out there that we do not need to compete with the United States necessarily on building the expensive foundation models, but there's just so many other frontiers that we can find synergies and complementary strengths.
Thank you very much. And so maybe shall we move on?
Can I just add to one thing?
We're not going to let you move on.
No, this is a point that we need to understand, because even in the United States, as I said, there's a lot of investments in R&D in the private sector, but the synergy with academic sector is not at the same level as you think that it could be. But we also have to be honest about it. In academia, are we ready to have that kind of a conversation with the private sector, to excite the private sector to want to co-invest? It is not they do not want to do it. It is that how do you do that in a way that shows mutual value propositions? And so I have to admit that we have not figured this out in any part of the world, and therefore there is a work to be done there also. Simply by saying that it has to be done, it won't get done. Some will get done thanks to the great policies that you're putting together, incentivizing industry because of tax benefits that they have. They will therefore do it. But even that, I find, would be done for not the right reasons. We have to develop the right underlying model of collaboration and cooperation. And I think that's something that still we all have to work together. And this is a great partnership moment between Japan and the US and other nations, like-minded nations. How do we build this value propositions that makes people want to work together like that?
Okay, thank you. So,
very nervous of time.
Journalist is very bad at moderating conversation, but they're very good at provoking. But now I feel like I have to play the role of a moderator to calm down a little bit and move on to a next. Yeah, you can make a comment at maybe at the end. So, but there are two other very juicy topics we have to cover. So, that is a second topic is the rare earth and critical mineral supply chain. So, Mr. Shiozaki, now Japan and China relation is getting tense, and China is mounting increasing economic pressure on Japan. And then there is a risk that they will sooner than later will stop the export of rare earth or critical mineral to Japan. And as I understand, Japan relies still on China like 60%. So my first question is how to mitigate or how to deal with the risk, with this risk. And also secondly, in order to diversify the source of critical minerals and rare earth, how Japan can cooperate with US and beyond US.
Thank you. This is a very important question. I think we've been long on defense in terms of rare earth exportations from the China and the threat of stopping it. I think it is time that we start searching for alternatives, and so that we can someday turn to offense. So one of the exciting developments that I think many of you might be aware of, there's a small island called Minami Torishima, 4,000 kilometers away from Japan. But that island is said to have centuries worth of rare earth mud, 4 miles below the ocean. So one of our ocean exploration vessels has now been launched January 12th, just recently, this week, to start digging into that mud. And we will have results in 2 months of whether or not we will be able to effectively extract rare earth from Minami Torishima. Now, if this succeeds, this will be a game changer because we will be not on the defense, but we will be able to be on the offense to maybe in the near future start exporting rare earth. Now, we all recognize that the extraction is not the full picture. The refinement is very, very important and difficult also. But once we can get the rare earth out of the ocean, I think there's tremendous opportunity for the United States and Japan to work on the refinement technology to make sure that we're no longer so dependent on Chinese rare earth.
That's great. The mood of this room is getting more brighter and brighter instead of getting gloomy. So on that note, Dr. Punch, I know that you are not necessarily the expert on mineral or earth, but how do you think that science and technology can help us to overcome the bottleneck or supply chain risk of rare earth and mineral by further diversifying its source than China? Yeah.
No, that's an excellent question. I cannot agree with you more, Shiozaki-san. I think we have, in many of these things, we have been playing defense strategy. Defense is never a strategy, it's offense. And we have General Petraeus here, right in the back. He will probably, he'll probably agree. What is the offense strategy that we have? And one of that is finding as many potential sources of critical minerals in your own backyard, okay? As you rightly said, in your own backyard. But there is also a sort of a, as you said, it is not the end of the story. Most of the critical minerals extracted then get sent to China or places where the processing happens there, and that's a huge national security risk too. And we have seen this play out in COVID, not only in that context, but in the general supply chain vulnerabilities that we have faced. So one of the things that we have invested in at NSF when we launched this new Directorate of Technology Innovation Partnerships, Regional Innovation Engines, is one of the regional innovation engines happens to be in Nevada. Nevada has the largest lithium mine, but we essentially built the entire ecosystem for extraction, processing, not only mining, extraction, processing, and full life cycle recycling. This is a very important thing in lithium, is with the batteries that use lithium, how do you extract them back? So there are enough scientific, discovery-oriented and applied translational research-oriented things that we need to work on. So that's one thing. The second is, we talked about alternatives. There are also synthetic material alternatives that is being looked at, is what might be other ways of creating not only other materials, but materials through synthetic processes. These are still research questions that needs to be looked at. And therefore, it is not one single simple solution, but it's multiple solutions, including expanding the extraction possibilities, having the full life cycle processing, and so on, within the nation or with like-minded nations as partners, both those strategies, as well as finding new ways of looking at new kind of materials, but also what synthetic materials can provide. So it's a combination of all of that.
Yeah, I'm tempted to ask Mr. Trump question again. He seems to be obsessed with the Greenland. And we media analyze that one of the reasons is that he really wants to have access to mineral in Greenland. Whether good or bad, but scientifically, how do you think this approach is effective?
I am not paid enough to answer that question. I'm not in the administration right now, so I don't think I can answer the question of what is the rationale. All I can tell you is I think all nations are taking a hard look. Japan is stating that. United States is doing that too. And I've seen that every nation is looking at seeing how best they can get access to mineral resources, critical mineral resources, because they all realize the vulnerability of not doing that and the reliance on supply chains. That's the only thing I can actually expound on.
Right.
I know you want to get a different answer, but that's all I can do.
Mr. Ozaki is ready to...
No, but perhaps I think the rare earth question is representative of a larger issue that we're all trying to address here, where we are now in the era of economic security. Geoeconomics is becoming a key instrument for exerting influence to other nations. And this time it was rare earth, but it could be other issues, like energy could be one. And so we always need to be consciously checking our supply chain if any component of the supply chain is being dependent on a particular adversary. And if it is, we need to find an alternative within our alliance partners. So this is something that I think the IHAS and Jimbo Sensei are excellent experts on, and especially US and Japan should be working on to make sure that we are not exposed to those vulnerabilities.
Yeah. So thank you. That brings us to a third and last topic, energy security and geopolitics.
You look so relieved to be able to move the discussion.
You play the role of moderator instead of me. So, but anyway, to be serious, as you say, there are many choke points that we have to overcome. And for Japan, it is energy. As we all know, Japan relies on more than 90% of oil coming from Middle East. And also, Japan imports more than about 10% of LNG from Russia, Far East, Sakhalin project. My question is, what is the strategy for Japan to diversify the source of energy as soon as possible? Japan is investing to US energy sector, but also another journalistic question is that Trump administration is ultimately asking Japan to pull out of Sakhalin 2. It's kind of a very sensitive diplomatic and economic question. So what is your thought on that?
Thank you very much. And first of all, I'd like to recognize that we have Abe Akie-san in the audience. Thank you so much for being here.
It is a role of moderator. It is a role of moderator.
Sorry.
But yeah.
But
please.
I just wanted to mention that
Yeah.
The late Prime Minister Abe was our leader that really spearheaded a lot of these efforts on making our nation energy independent. And yes, it is true that we still depend on Sakhalin 2 for 9% of our LNGs. And we do not agree that we should be funding Russia to continue its war on Ukraine. However, we also need to be mindful that an abrupt and immediate pullout of Japan from Sakhalin 2 will just allow that license to be transferred over to Russia and China for free. And that is also not something that we would want. So I think we need to make this transition smooth and strategic. And I think the Alaska LNG would be one opportunity that we could both explore, but we also need the United States to help us because the price points are just too far high to make it commercially viable. So we will be looking for cooperation with the United States. Maybe the United States government could provide subsidies or help on research or assistance to private companies to make sure that our co-investments in Alaska LNG potentially could be commercially viable as well as being strategically important.
Yeah. So, Dr. Punch, from your perspective, how can science and technology help us to tackle with the energy, risk of related to energy supply, and also how will U.S. and Japan be able to collaborate even more effectively to diversify our source of energy, especially for Japan?
No, it's a very, very good question. So, as with anything with risk, diversification is important. So this is very true of energy too. Today, the dominant energy sources, the challenge that comes with the dominant energy sources today is carbon. And so, where you talked about science, technology, innovation, so the intense focus of science, technology, innovation activities are how do you mitigate the effect of carbon? So there's a lot of work that happens on carbon capture, recycling, all of those kinds of things that are being worked on as we speak. So that's one kind of innovation that is required to happen because we can, yes, of course, plan for a transition. We can talk about all the other energy sources, but yet at the end of the day, the economy and the economics of all of this will dictate what people will actually deploy and use. So let's not forget that. So then that begs the next question, how do we prepare for the transition and the future? It is a variety of technologies that are out there. We know that, wind, solar, nuclear, now small nuclear reactors, SMRs, right? And then we have, of course, hydrogen. We have a variety of technologies that are being looked at as part of the portfolio of mitigating the risk and also preparing for the transition and for the future. So what National Science Foundation, Department of Energy, and Department of Defense and others, what we do is we are investing not only in what technologies of today do, and mitigate the effects of why they cannot be the proliferating or dominating energy sources into the future, but more importantly, look at what might be the new energy sources that we need to invest on. In all of this, we know that battery storage is a huge part of this. And that's why there is, goes back to the critical minerals discussion that we had before. How do we ensure that storage solutions are also at a level where we can potentially, balance all of this? Because at the end of the day, being able to fire up a coal plant or being able to fire up a fossil fuel plant versus having to look at the sun and when it sets or rises, all of this is a matter of how do you balance the energy requirements, the peaks and the valleys. People know this better. That's one thing that needs to be looked at. The other challenge that people have recognized is the source of where the energy is being created does not necessarily have the capacity to transport it. And this is why the whole smart grid infrastructure was laid with the understanding of many, many distributed sources of energy. It was concentrated sources of energy connected through the grids. But now that's also being rethought. How can local grid solutions can be, in the part of a global grid solution? All of these things are part of the science, technology, innovation portfolio in terms of how you do all of this. And I can tell you, the last point is that we need a lot of young startup entrepreneurial minds playing in this space. That's where the phenomenal ideas and relying on just the large energy companies alone to come up with innovations, they will, but that is necessary but not sufficient. So I think that's a significant investment, and that's where NSF has also played a lot of emphasis on this in the last few years.
Okay.
May I add?
Yeah, I contacted.
Yes,
so
thank you so much. You're a wonderful moderator.
Then we will move to Q&A.
No, I'm glad that Dr. Panch touched upon nuclear energy, because I think this is a very, very important area of potential collaboration between Japan and the United States. Japan has the talent and capability of developing nuclear power plants, especially the SMRs, the small module reactors. But Japan also faced challenges, because 2011 we had the Fukushima incident, and since then it has become somewhat of a political taboo to create and construct new power plants in Japan. So this is an area where perhaps the Japanese technology can meet the US energy demands for further collaboration using the talent here in Japan to benefit both of our economies. I must say, the Jimbo-san's think tank, the original Asia Pacific Initiative, was founded in 2011, right after the Fukushima incident, conducting an independent review on that accident. It's 15 years, and maybe it's time that we move forward from that trauma to make sure that we learn the lessons and we deploy those lessons to a wider economic community.
Very great point.
Can I add to that?
Okay, sure.
This is
please.
Sure. Because this is science, technology, innovation part of the discussion. One thing that you said, which is very important for us not to forget, is that we have not engaged as technology developers, designers, creators, enough of the population and people and social scientists and humanists in our thinking. This has been a big mistake. And AI is opening this up bare. We are seeing this. We are trying to put band-aids on the problem. So let's focus on this. And again, between Japan and US, this can be a great partnership. How do we embrace social scientists, humanists, artists, and other disciplinary folks in the creation of the ideas around science, technology, and innovation?
Thank you very much. So we have about 20 minutes, and it is a Q&A. So could you raise the question? Yeah, please. And could you identify yourself first?
I'm Kathy Matsui. I'm a general partner at Empower Partners. We have a venture capital fund. So these are going to be very self-interested questions. But number one, I think in the I'm an American, by the way, from California, but I think in the United States, what you said was very relevant in so far as the government, National Science Foundation, DARPA, et cetera. I mean, they really invested heavily into super impossible technologies from a very early stage. And I'm wondering, does Japan have a strategy that is similar to, say, NSF, DARPA? I know METI is working very hard with NEDO, kind of subsidies, and that's very generous. But money only goes so far, right? I think what the US has done, if I may say so, seems to be building paradigms. And I can tell you from a venture capital perspective, some of these deep tech technologies are so long dated that for a life of an average VC fund, which is 10 years, it's too short. So we need government support to de-risk these technologies very early on. So just curious about that. Number two, this is a self-interest question. Number two is nuclear fusion. We talk about nuclear fission, SMRs. To me, nuclear fusion, taking the power of nature. Japan also has global leading talent in nuclear fusion. And how does the Japanese government think about that? And lastly, this is probably going to offend you, but if the US doesn't want foreign talent, does Japan have a strategy to recruit that top foreign talent to come to Japan?
Thank you. Please.
Thank you. So just 3 points. First, in terms of the long-term investment, we have a 5-year plan on ST&I that gets renewed, and it's going to be renewed this April. This upcoming 7th STI basic plan will have 5 or 6 designated long-term areas of research and investment. And AI will be one of them. Fusion will also be one of them. So we try to hold these structures as ways to maintain long-term investment because, as you mentioned, research does take time, and we often face political pressure that what you said is wrong, you're not making any results or money. So we try to protect that. Second, the challenge in Japan is that why don't we have a DARPA? We still suffer from this trauma from World War II, where a lot of academic research institutions prohibit research and development in military technologies. And military technology can sometimes be over-interpreted into defense technologies as a whole. So we're trying to fix this. And in this upcoming 7th plan, we are going to clearly state that dual-use technology is going to be beneficial for advancing our national interests, and universities and institutions should be willing to take on those areas of research. Finally, what do we do with the talent that ran away from the United States? I didn't say that explicitly, but we have the J-RISE initiative with lots of funding for any researchers that are interested in coming to Japan. We will have a pretty attractive package to invite a lot of those researchers. So if they want to spend a few years in Japan and maybe go back to the United States later, we're welcome to that. So if you know any talent in the United States, please let them know that we have a program for them.
Dr. Punch?
It's one of the greatest things about the United States is that it did not just welcome talent to come and engage in a partnership or spend a few years. It gave the opportunity for them to stay, immigrate, be part of that society, and be contributing members of society. I don't think anywhere else has got this unbelievable sourcing that has happened over several decades. And this is a very, very important component of building a robust, vibrant economy. And that's why I talked about this additive of domestic talent being not substituted by global talent, but domestic talent and global talent working together, which then points to immigration reform and the welcoming and retaining of folks. That's an important thing that we should keep in mind, as much as it is important to get mechanisms by which people are able to be attracted. I still will tell you, I just came from India, and I'm going to go back this afternoon. Still, US is the destination of choice. Well, contrary to what people may think, if you look at to all the things that you read about, but if you look at the decrease in the enrollment of international students in US universities, it has not suffered a humongous loss. And I hope that that will what it will be at the end of the day and will keep this moving forward. But for me, the key is how do we get not just academic institutions only producing the talent, but how do we get the talent to work in the new AI era where the distance between an academic sector and the industry sector cannot be what it is today. This will not work. This paradigm will not work. It's got to change. So I'm personally thinking about that a lot in terms of what kind of things that we need to do. But I would strongly encourage really a serious thinking. This is not a higher education discussion, I get that, but it cannot be without that discussion. There's fundamental transformation required. Shiozaki-san and I had a very brief moment about universities and how they operate. I'm a faculty member. I cherish that. But I think for far too long, universities have been only sort of shaped by faculty member input. Nothing wrong with that. But it cannot be only. It's got to be along with others. I think it's time for the transformative thinking. This is a national security issue. This is a critical minerals issue. This is an energy security issue. It's everything because we need these new models for the future.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
Thank you very much. Thank you for taking again questions. I have two questions, most to Shiozaki-san. I wonder if one of the key strategy topic for you shouldn't be putting Japan at a good English level. Because when I see your wonderful English and I see the ranking of Japan in English, I don't even want to laugh about it anymore because I think we are at the level of Afghanistan or something. And I think it's a huge problem between Japan and the rest of the world and even between migrants and Japanese citizens, which nurture so many misunderstandings. So don't you think there should be a national strategy about just the English language, And my second question is, how do you estimate the value, I know it's very hard, but of research? So Japan recently had a few failures, I have to say, like the space jet. And there's a lot of questions, if you want my opinion, about Rapidus and about the hydrogen society and these big topics. And these are taxpayer money at the end of the day. How can you estimate the best, the value, the lasting value of such subsidies? Thank you.
Thank you. Both excellent questions. On English, it's been an issue for 3 or 4 decades. We've tried to elevate the level of oral English skills in Japan. We made some progress, but I recognize that we're still far away. Some of us have had opportunities, lucky to study in the United States, and I think more and more young people are looking to that opportunity. So we'll continue to work on that. I don't have a silver bullet, but if you do, please let me know. In terms of, what was your second question? Financing. Financing what?
Financing research.
Financing research.
Industrial project.
Yes. So I had a response. I forgot. Can you repeat that question once again?
So Japan has finance on the state level.
Oh yes. Okay. I'm sorry. Yes. So what do you do if you focus on a specific industry and turns out to be a failure or is not returning your investment? This happens a lot, and that's why we have research, because we don't know whether there's going to be a solid outcome or not. I think the only solution to that is diversification. We invest in many fields to make sure that there is a probability that some of them will turn out to be successes. And once we have an early detection of success, we can make decision on whether or not to invest further. But before that, at the entry exploratory level of academia, I think the next basic plan will focus on diversification.
Thank you. And next question, please.
My name is Ken Jimbo. I'm pretty much surprised that my name has been cited throughout this morning and never been cited so frequently as in my life. But I hope that I don't disappoint anybody. But my question is about the Shiozaki-san's concept on the offense-defense dynamics. And by looking at adoption of the economic security promotion law, we have identified this, the bunch of critical technologies needs to be protected. And at the same time, the cultivation of the so-called strategic indispensability by subsidies and protections and all measures. And then you mentioned about those types of the sets of defense measures turn into the offensive elements in the coming years. And I think we have already outlined in the active cyber defense capability in the new scheme, but also that with having new materials like a rare earth by ourselves, that could be the tool for the offensive measures as well, expecting that there will be some kind of mutual vulnerability between two sides, exploring their vulnerability, and we have offensive measures, so that the kind of the mutual deterrence could happen in the future. What kind of conceptualization that you have in your mind in joining in the LDP discussion on the economic security, how much of those kind of offensive elements can now be materialized in the Japanese strategic thinking?
Thank you so much. And he's the expert in this field, so
He knows the answer.
But I think it's very important of the findings that we learn when we study our supply chain and look for vulnerabilities. And in order to make this not only a defense strategy, but also an offense strategy, we need to do the same with other nations as well, because they also have vulnerabilities, they also have dependencies. So if we can find an area where we can leverage some of our strengths in terms of other countries' supply chains, we make our economies mutually dependent, making the world a safer place. So I think that's something that all of us should work on.
Yeah. Dr. Punch, do you have anything to?
No, I think it was very, very well said. I think the point that I would agree with is that like-minded nations, we have not hardwired ourselves. In the defense sense, there's a lot more than in strategy and so on. But in science, technology, innovation, and I will tell you this in the Japan context, the last 5 years when I was at NSF, I wanted to make sure that the global partnerships were not episodic or at a level which is much more low-key, but much more bombastic and solving grand challenge problems together with Japan. Through the Quad partnership, we did many investments, as well as with the bilateral partnerships with Japan. We had projects that we worked on, the same with other bilateral partners. This is something that has got to become much more systemic than it has been. It's been very episodic, very, very marginal, unless we get where like-minded nations can start to partner and wire ourselves and co-create things together. That's the way in which we can hyper outcompete in terms of our adversarial competitors. This is very, very important. No one nation can do this alone, and therefore we need to find like-minded nations to work together. And the science technology investments often is looked upon not as much in the front end as a defense partnership would be looked at. And so this has to change. That shift has to happen, particularly in the AI era. That shift has to happen fast.
Thank you. And another question, please. Okay, while we wait for another question, maybe I'd like to ask, at the end, at the closing comment, I'd like to both of you to respond this question. My question is, what is the worst case scenario that you can worry about and that we should prepare for in the context of US-China or US and US allies versus China's competition over the AI and advanced technology? What are the nightmare scenarios that we have to worry and what we should do in order to prevent that? That is my question, and please think about it and wait for another question. Oh, yeah. So maybe we'll take two last questions over there. So 3 questions, then wrap up with the concluding comment. Yeah.
Thank you very much for this convening. Thank you to the panelists. My name is Rick Shanger. I'm president of Santana Education. A question I have for the representative is one around entrepreneurship. And as you think about science, technology, and innovation, it needs to be undergirded with entrepreneurs. And there's been some talk over the years that Japan has lost its entrepreneurial spirit, that it doesn't have that same spirit maybe had 2 or 3 decades ago. And without that spirit, it may be hard to take those innovations that are coming out of the research labs or coming out of innovation industry and turn it into something. Can you comment about where Japan is thinking about that, rebuilding that entrepreneurial spirit, that culture in Japan? And I'd love to get your thoughts.
Thank you. You want to ask? Yeah. Do you want to ask a question?
So I just want to add something to your excellent question, Hiro-san, because many of us have for a long time talked about nuclear power, nuclear war as the worst case scenario or some kind of nuclear disaster. And now we have artificial intelligence, we have AI. So if you could speak on the panel about how you regard that danger and how to mitigate the risk of AI and nuclear combining to essentially eliminate the human race.
Yeah, that's a great question. And then, yeah, this is the last question.
Hello, my name is Jay Kwok. I'm a reporter for MLEX. It's a UK news agency. This question is for Mr. Shiozaki. Actually, I understood from the talk as you ruling out sovereign AI or sovereign Japanese AI kind of wholly replacing US foundational models. So could you tell us a bit more about your blueprint of the future? What do you see in the national security context as Japan's government and key companies? How are they using AI? What kind of AIs are we using, and how do you see usage of foreign foundational models affecting national security?
Okay. So we have 5 minutes. So could you respond quickly, and then you please respond to a question from Evelyn and I about nightmare scenario and what.
Okay, so I'll take the two questions quickly. So in terms of entrepreneurship, we are in the 4th year of Prime Minister Kishida's originated 5-year plan for boosting entrepreneurship. And in the course of these years, we have dramatically increased the amount of investment that goes into entrepreneurship. We have tried to deregulate a lot of the hurdles that were infringing upon some of the developments of entrepreneurs. We have some excellent entrepreneurs in this room today as well. So please give us a few more years. You'll be seeing a lot of exciting new entrepreneurs blooming out of this country. In terms of what do we do about the dependency of AI, Jake, you asked that question. I think oftentimes people jump to the conclusion, it's national security, we need a national LLM. And I think there's a little more nuance to that. Even if we use a foreign large language model, if we have the data stored on premise, if we make sure that the data is not being used for training, and if we make sure that we have the efficient and sufficient computational capacity onshore, I believe there is a sufficient level of independence that we can assure moving forward in using AI, because we will have options of different foundation models, excellent ones, number of ones, to be choosing from, as long as we have that basic infrastructure.
Thank you. So lastly, could you respond to a key question about nightmare scenario and also Evelyn's question? And I'm sure we only have 2 minutes left, 2 minutes and a half left, but I'm sure that Evelyn will not get mad even if we extend another 5 minutes to respond to her key question. So which go first?
What a positive way to end a panel.
3 minutes each. 3 minutes
right.
each.
Last November, I was in Italy, and we had a small conference talking about the worst-case scenario of what AI would do. And we had representatives from the United States, we had representatives from Europe and other parts of the world. The worst-case scenario was not a nuclear war, but some rogue actors having access to frontier LLM models, jailbreaking them, basically unlocking their safety features and using them for bioterrorism or other kind of terrorism attacks. We believe that there will be a necessity for increased security assurance and surveillance over some of these advanced models. I think the United States CASI is running that function. I just visited the UK AC, the AI Security Institute, that also does pre-launch red team checking of the models. And Japan's AC itself is doubling up its headcount to make sure that we have equivalent capacity to make sure. So AI is mostly to the benefit of mankind. We need to make sure that we have the right safeguards to make sure that we can allow the positive and safe use of AI in the future. And I think that's where US and Japan should really continue to work on. Thank you.
No, I think I resonate with you on the positive, emphasis on the positive side, but to acknowledge the challenge. And not only acknowledge that, understand the challenge, and then mitigate it and or eliminate where possible. So let me talk about there is a lot of LLM-based discussions. LLM to me is one facet. I know it is a dominating facet today of where AI is going, but there is a lot more technological advances in AI, LLM-like, but not just LLM only, that are being worked upon. And you talked about the infringement of these kinds of LLMs. The key challenge is when rogue actors play with the weights, or they train it with data sets that are totally contrary to what that particular application was meant for. All of these things present immense challenges. Now, again, I will say that no one nation can solve this problem alone. We need to work together. In fact, I would argue that it is in the best interest of even our adversarial partners to want to work together, because we often tend to think it is us versus them. In this particular area, I don't think it's us versus them, just like in the nuclear era, right, where we had the agreements and non-proliferation treaties and so on. This is very, very important for us to recognize that we need to work with partners like China and others so that we come up with collective rules of behavior and not think that we can solve it all by ourselves or even with a group of like-minded partners. So that's something that I want us to be very cognizant of. I think we are, and I see already efforts in that direction because it's in our collective interest for the sake of humanity to work together in these areas. To talk about the worst-case scenario, yes, the worst-case scenario can become real if we allow these things to run amok. And there is tremendous amount of effort that is happening both in the public domain and in the non-public domain. A lot of effort is going on in terms of how do we synergize our efforts to make sure that we work on mitigating these kinds of activities. Some are, of course, based on two things. One is how do we ensure that the kind of access to infrastructure, data, and other things are made more freely available for societies and individual groups that can misuse it. Two, the availability of access to infrastructure, data, models and other things for people who actually needed to be able to come up with innovations to address this issue. Now, this is a significant problem right now in the United States, right? If you look at the majority of the access to infrastructure, it resides on a few companies who have access to that infrastructure because they can invest at that scale. If you all, and I think we can all agree, that there is a lot of interesting solutions that can emanate from the academic sector. It has always been the case, or even national labs for that matter. But if you look at the access to infrastructure by universities, university researchers, and even national labs at this point in time, it pales in comparison with what access that these companies have. So we need to make sure that this access becomes not an impediment to making sure that we find good solutions, right solutions, and advances solutions really at speed. So the Genesis Initiative, I go back to this, was one of the precursors for the Genesis Initiative in terms of thinking was how do we moderate the situation by bringing more access, by bringing people together and getting even industry to co-invest and co-create things so that we can actually not befall this kind of future that we are all worried about. So this is exceedingly important. And I'm glad that, that Japan and US will partner. I know my good friend Dario Gil, the Undersecretary, is going to be visiting here soon. And so these are the ways in which we have to hyperwire ourselves and see how we can all not only understand the complexity of what we are facing, but also look at how do we actually provide the necessary resources to be able to find the solutions, in addition to developing the rules of order in a much more global sense.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Shiozaki, we have still 2 minutes before you go back to election campaign. Is there anything you want to say?
No, I was just looking at you, wanting to congratulate you on being a wonderful moderator. So thank you so much, Akita-san, for being a great moderator.
Oh, thank you. Oh, yeah. So thank you. Please join me to thank two panelists. Thank you again.